You've probably been in a conflict where everyone talks in circles, no one agrees, and the tension just gets worse. Knowing about conflict styles is helpful, but it's not enough. What you really need is a clear process you can follow, step by step, to resolve conflict constructively. So in this video, I will walk you through a 7-step framework built for managers. Whether you're dealing with clashing priorities, frustrated teammates, or high-stake decisions. This method will help you lead with clarity and fairness. Alright, now let's go really into it, that if there's a conflict in your department, how you deal with that. So, you know there's a conflict, the team can't figure it out themselves how to solve the problem, so you need to step in because you can't have it lingering. You as a manager need to take action on that. So, when conflict is chaotic, you start by listening first. So as a manager, your first job is to understand how each person sees the situation. So in this case, I have, for example, 2 people and they have a conflict together. So for example, I ask them both to come in my office and we talk about with the 3 of us. So I listen to each of the person and I want to see what their situation is. So what you do first is you listen to each perspective, right? Together or separately you can do that, but I think together is often better because if you do it together, then they both will hear each other's perspectives, which they probably haven't heard because they were probably shouting to each other. So let people explain what they think is happening, where they feel blocked, and what they believe the problem is. So you do that one by one, and often when I had to do it, they're interrupting each other, and then you have to say, please be quiet now. First you talk, and then the other person talk. And if you do this in a bigger group, you have to do it like this too. You have to be the person facilitating this in a proper way, and then don't let it become chaotic. And for you, the rules are in this phase that you don't solve yet, and you don't align yet, and no reframing yet. So that's the beginning, the listening. And questions you might ask, for example, so walk me through how you see this situation. Or what's been difficult from your point of view. Or what do you think is getting in the way? And this creates psychological safety and surfaces assumptions. And what I mean with psychological safety, it gives the idea that now the person that feels probably not being heard, the needs are not being met, they feel now safe to express it in an environment where somebody's there, you, the facilitator, that really wants to listen to it, and they get a time and a place to give their and talk about their issues. And then also, what I also mentioned there, you will see assumptions coming out from both sides or several sides, and that's actually quite a good thing because you can work on those assumptions, recalibrate them, and that will give you already first steps towards the solution. So, now that you heard the perspectives, so you have heard what the situation is, it's from the 2 sides or 3 or 4, I don't know how many sides, it's now clear. Now when you want to start solving the conflict, right? So what we can do is we can use the step-by-step conflict resolution approach framework, a whole mouthful, to create more clarity in that. So let's look at that. We'll look at it step by step. I just go quickly over it. So the first step is that you want to align on outcomes. You want to look at what do we want to achieve after this conflict is over. Then you want to establish the facts. You want to clarify the impact of the conflict and the friction it causes. You want to generate options. So what do we think are options to solve this? We want to agree if it's a bigger problem, maybe we need to agree on evaluation criteria. So if you have the options, maybe you need to evaluate them with some criteria to choose which one you're going to choose, right? And then in number 6, maybe we can combine or refine some things to come to an even better solution. And then the last step is agreement and next step. Sorry, you can't see that there, but it says next step. So you want to agree and you want to be very concrete about the next step. So that's a short summary. Let's go into it deeper now. So number 1, align on outcomes. So what you want to do there, so you shift the conversation from who's causing the problem to what are we trying to deliver? What are we trying to achieve? Because both of the members or several team members, they have an issue. But let's go back to the basic. What are we trying to achieve? They're trying to work for the company to achieve something, right? So ask, for example, what are we trying to achieve with this project? Or what does good look like for this deliverable? Or what does success look like from a timeline and quality perspective? And then you listen to their answers, and what you want to do as a manager facilitator, you want to then summarize that and say, for example, okay, so if I understand you well and I summarize this, so we are aligned that the goal is by, and this is just some example, right? But you want to more or less summarize what you hear, because then you can move to the next step. And the next step is that you then, so you know which outcome you're working towards. Now you want to establish the facts. So before you heard the emotions, you heard assumptions, now we want to get into the facts. So establish the facts, and that is the work reality, right? So remove blame by grounding the discussion in observable behavior. So for example, ask, okay, let's list the facts. What's happened so far? Or you can ask, where have handoffs been delayed? So in this case, for example, there's a delay because a process, something went wrong, and you can ask about that specifically. Or where has quality fallen short of expectations? So imagine the app is being released and the quality is not good. And then a question like that could be in there. So as a manager now, you want to summarize this a little bit, right? What are now the facts that you established from asking these questions and getting the information together? So you might summarize it in a way like, okay, so factually we're seeing delays at, or quality issues at, and maybe unclear ownership at. So you want to address exactly where the issues are, because that sets you up for the next step. And that is clarify the impact and the friction, right? So that's the impact and the friction of the conflict. So make the cost of the conflict visible without emotional escalation. So the cost could be literal cost, right? But often it's also not literal cost in terms of delay or some kind of thing. So as a manager, you might ask, for example, one at a time, how is this affecting your ability to do work? And then maybe somebody says, yeah, it takes me 20% more time, or it takes me 30% more resources to do this. And where are you getting blocked? And what's slowing you down most right now? So you can then summarize, because you want to make sure that they understand that the conflict, that has to end, that it's not an option anymore. And by clarifying the impact and the friction, they hopefully realize, okay, we need to move ahead towards a solution. So as a manager, you can summarize that. You can say, so the friction is coming from waiting on each other, unclear ownership, and rework due to quality gaps. So that sets you up, that summary of the conclusion that everybody agrees with each other of what the issues are, sets you up for the next step. And that is generate option. And that is really going into the solutions phase, right? So this is generate options. That's many times process focused, right? You will talk with the group or with the two people about it. So move them out of the defensiveness and into joint problem solving. And you can ask questions like, what could we change in how you work together? Or where could ownership be clear? Or what would reduce waiting time? There's many questions you can ask there, right? And once that is clear, you can say, okay, good. We've got several workable options here. So you write them somewhere on a whiteboard or whatever, that it's clear what options you have. And that again sets you up for the next stage. And that is agree on evaluation criteria. So you want to prevent circular arguments and future frustrations. So you want to make sure that you evaluate the options. But how do you evaluate them, right? Some discussions, it's very clear. It's very clear what the options should be. But if you have options that are quite close to each other, then maybe you need to bring in evaluation criteria. And you can ask, for example, okay, so what should we optimize for? If we look at, for example, speed, quality, and clarity, what matters most here? So maybe you say speed, and then the options you have, you can measure against speed. And then you can say, okay, we go to the option that delivers speed the fastest, right? Or what constraints do we have? So that's what you want to do in this phase. So as a manager, you can say then, okay, so we'll prioritize clarity of ownership and predictability on delivery over speed, right? So we want predictability and ownership. So if speed comes as a second or a third priority, then you are all in agreement that you're fine with that, right? So now you have some good evaluation criteria. Then, if necessary and possible, maybe you can combine or refine some things out of the options, right? So what you want to do is you want to build a shared operating agreement. So maybe you see options that have a good aspect to it and another option too, and maybe you can combine them. So you can look at, okay, which parts of these options solve the real problem, or what combination would actually work day to day. And this might not always be necessary, this step, right? Because if you have a relatively straightforward solution, this might not be necessary. This is maybe only necessary when you have big problems and you really need to go down to the nitty-gritty of it. So in this phase, if you're looking for things to combine and refine, you can say, okay, here's what I'm hearing as a combined approach. So that is the solution phase already, right? Then we go to the agreement. So now you had a good option. You decide on which option you want. So that is agreement and next step. So turn clarity into execution, right? You've chosen one option, or you combine several points out of an option that worked the best, and you say, okay, this is the best option. And now you want to get an agreement with that. And that is, okay, are you both aligned on this? And anything unclear, unrealistic? And when should we review how this is working? So as a manager, you can close this part of the conversation by, okay, great. So this is our working agreement, and we'll review it in 2 weeks and adjust if needed. So you want to make sure that you check it in a few weeks or a few days so that you're clear with each other on what's needed. And then something that's also important that is not on the slide here, that is the next step. So make sure that you ask each person, what are you going to do now? Because you can't walk out of a meeting with all kinds of good plans and general good ideas, but it's more important to have a workable action that both or one of them or you are going to take, right? So define a specific next step. Okay? So that is a very elaborate way of solving a conflict. So this framework is, of course, to cover big and small problems. But if you have a smaller problem, you probably only will use step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then you maybe go to step 7, right? So maybe step 5 and 6 are not always necessary. But I just want to give you a framework that you can look at and that you can use. So how do you use this framework then? If you got a conflict, then before you call the people in for a meeting, for example, or a Zoom call or whatever, what you want to do is you're going to look at this, you're going to write some things down, what you think where it's going to go. And this helps you to be ahead a little bit of the conversation because you know the steps of the conversations that you want to go through. All right? Okay, good luck with that. Thanks for watching. You are taking real steps towards becoming a stronger, more effective leader. So, what did you find most helpful today? Drop it in the comments if you'd like to share. And want to go further? Check out my full courses for step-by-step lessons on becoming a better manager. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new video. See you in the next one.